Hi, and welcome to the Math Together show. I'm Dr. Sue Looney.
I'm Molly Vokey.
And I'm Heidi Sipnani.
We are really excited about our show today. We have been talking a lot with each other and with other educators, and we're going to tackle this question. How do you maintain best practices in math instruction during our new normal? We're going to take that on. We're going to answer some questions. We're going to take your questions. We're going to give you some resources. So we're really excited to roll up our sleeves and get into this.
So we want to just remind you that we are live. So say hello to us if you are listening. Make comments in the comment box. Hit like. Share us if you like. Ask lots of questions because we are here to serve you. And our thoughts are ours, but we would love to hear what you are thinking about. And later on in the show, we are going to share some resources with you. Each section, we have a resource to share, which is we found really valuable for our own learning. So we hope you do too. And we have some other things that we want to share with you. We have a new study group that is coming up. I don't know what the dates are, so we'll share with that later. And of course, we want you to join us in Math Together. And then we have a new coffee chat too. So you're going to find out information about that later.
Yeah, and all of those things are linked on just the main website. So if you just look at the things across the top, you can find each of those events. So I think, Heidi, you're going to kick us off.
I am. So one thing that we would like to hear from you in the comments section, and we'll be checking back and forth throughout because we know that sometimes there's a little bit of a delay in how quickly those comments get to us. But we want to ask, what are those instructional practices that we struggle with due to social learning requirements or distance learning? So when we think about what happened this spring, and whatever is happening this fall, it can be very different wherever you are. We want to consider, okay, so what are those things that we're really concerned about? What are those best practices that we're thinking in the back of our minds, like, I don't want to give this up. This is a best practice for my students. This helps them learn. This is something I've been working on in my own practice. How do I make sure that still continues? Because that's that piece, right? There's no, like, why are we going back if we can't hold on to those good practices? And so we want to think about how we make sure that we're thinking about and addressing those issues as we go forward. So, hello, Kristen.
I know, Kristen's with us today.
But in thinking about that, ladies, what are some of those challenges that we come across?
Well, you know, I think we have a lot of worries about this. I saw a picture, I don't know if anyone else saw it, of students in rows. Molly, I remember you sharing it, right? We had all of our students in rows in boxes of plexiglass. And it's like, oh my gosh, how am I going to hold on to best practice if that's my environment, right? We don't, first and foremost is our actual well-being and physical health, and then our mental health. But then, like, how am I going to teach the way I want to, you know? So I know there's lots of worries, and we've kind of summed them up. But curious what's on your mind too, right?
Yeah. So those three areas that have kind of bubbled to the top for us over and over as we've been working with teachers, and we're all currently supporting districts and individual teachers and thinking about how is it that we move forward and how is it that we plan. And so some things that have come up are math tools. What am I going to do with my manipulatives? Like, I absolutely have to have those to teach students to think conceptually and build their own understanding. I want them to have those opportunities to explore in a hands-on way. But they can't share manipulatives, and I only have so many. And what happens if they go home? Then we have group work, right? So we all have these opportunities that we want students to be able to hear and see other students work and hear from them. And then how am I differentiating my instruction when I may not be free to move around the classroom, they may not be free to move around the classroom, and I'm planning for potentially 3 different modes of instruction. Yeah. So we want to kind of address those things that have come to the top. But there's something that we've noticed about these three areas of conversation, and maybe one of you wants to jump in with.
Yeah, I mean, as we have these things come to the top, we realize these are the issues that we are always talking about with teachers. This is not new stuff for us to be discussing. Maybe we're discussing it in a different way, but for sure, these are things that teachers find challenging regardless of pandemic and in school, out of school situations. So I think if we can conquer these topics in a pandemic with all of this unknown, then what an amazing teacher we will be. Yeah. When this is over. Hi, Garrett. Happy to have you back. So anyway, so those are some of the things that we've been thinking about. And I think we're going to start with tools, right, Sue?
Yeah, so we're going to jump in. So we have three topics we're thinking about, and we're going to offer you three plans, right? So we can not just think about it, but take action. So using math tools and manipulatives in teaching mathematics is non-negotiable. We absolutely need to have our tools so that kids develop deep conceptual understanding and those brain synapses fire and connect so that we have long-term memory as we construct understanding. So this is an identified best practice. It is not optional. And yet, sharing math tools is not so safe when we are spreading germs potentially. So what we have put together is a plan for you. And we feel that, and maybe this has occurred to other people as well, children need their own set of manipulatives. But it's deeper than that. So there's two things. We want them to be in school as their own set, but also an at-home set. So we want to make sure students and families, especially if we're not going to have our students in front of us at all, have those tools. In order to do that could be a tremendous expense. I work with schools and teachers where schools are finding the dollars to send actual tools home. But what we did in the service of equity is we created a list of free things. And those free things are printable manipulatives. So we're going to share, I'm going to paste it in the comments in a moment, a link that you can get from us that lists those manipulatives that each grade level K-8 should be sending home for your at-home toolkit. And every one of them can just be printed right from that link. So all schools can do this. We just need, to put them in a Ziploc bag or put them in a box, and our families can cut them. We don't even have to ask students to spend hours and hours cutting. So we're really excited to share that with you. And the other thing you can do, if you don't like the printable idea and you do have access, you can use that to say, well, these are the tools. So we don't want to inundate families with, here's everything that you could use. We want to just sort of narrow it down to the core set of things. So we're going to provide that for you. Here's your list by grade level of what families should have, and everyone could have that for free. The other piece, does someone want to jump in on the virtual manipulatives? Because we're adding as well.
We also put together a short list at the end of this document that has some websites that you can go to that has virtual manipulatives. And we're thinking that these are a good option if your district knows that all of your students have access to the internet. So we have found these to be really helpful in the work that we do. And well, let me just see what Kristen's saying. She said, can we consider which manipulatives are able to be used in many ways? So we're not sending home lots of different tools. Kristen, we already have had discussions about that. So we narrowed down by grade level what we thought the most important and most versatile tools are. So that there's not an excessive amount of cutting and the bags aren't bursting with stuff. So we already considered that. And of course, we have many, many other ideas of things that we would like to have. They're kind of a bonus. and potentially things you might have in school that wouldn't go home. But these ones are really kind of intended to be the ones that go home. So that's an awesome question. Thanks so much.
So that link has been shared, right? So if you're interested in seeing that list, and then, give us some feedback on that too, if you feel like something is missing, or take that and build from there.
And we want to consider too, that link between virtual and physical manipulatives is important, but particularly with young children, and as we're building that conceptual understanding, we do want to start with a physical manipulative that they can touch, hold, and physically manipulate before we move into a virtual manipulative. So when we think about that range from concrete, pictorial, or representational to abstract, the virtual manipulatives really do fall in that middle section, even though we might be able to rotate them and move them in many similar ways. It's not exactly the same learning style. And so as much as possible, we want to still provide students, even if everybody has access to an internet and to the device, we want to make sure that we're not skipping out on that first step, and that we're still providing the hands-on learning for students.
Yeah. All good
yeah,
stuff.
and that might happen, right? That might happen in the classroom, right? So you might say, we're going to use these manipulatives today to explore this concept, and then at home they might be using either the paper or the virtual, depending on how it's working in your school.
Yeah. So that's the first best practice that we want to tackle, and that's our easiest one. Like, check. And we can think about equity. We can think about access, and all of that. The next one we wanted to talk about is group work. So we know that there's so many benefits to children working in groups, but I think like more than ever right now, because we've been isolated and we're going to be back together again. And it matters that we group our kids and we give them opportunities to interact with one another.
Yeah, so we have been looking for some information on, what are some ideas that are out there on how we can still have kids work in groups, because research shows that, kids who are talking to each other and discussing mathematics are definitely further along than kids who are not. So we found a blog by Caitlin Tucker, and she is a specialist in blended learning. So she talks about this type of learning all the time. And what she's kind of carved out for us is a plan that shows that you can still have kids working in groups. And she actually shows a couple of different scenarios of how you can arrange your desks. So the link that Sue just put into the comments is this particular document that we're talking about. She's talking about putting desks into clusters so that, here you might have your room divided up into 4, and you might have a group of desks here and here and here and here, still distant from each other, but just obviously a group. And we're hoping that kids can use individual whiteboards to communicate with each other. We think it's still possible for kids to do, partner work. Even if they have to face forward, we think you can move your seat so that you can talk to one person and move your seat back. We think it should still be possible. There's lots of other ways that we've talked about with online. So if you are teaching remotely, there are a ton of different ways in which you can put kids in groups. If you're using Zoom, then there's the obvious option there to put kids in groups. Jamboard allows. Heidi's been working with Jamboard. I don't know if you want to talk anything about that, Heidi.
Well, I want to stay with the face-to-face possibility, because some of us may have them. So the advice from Caitlin is, if at all possible, let's not be in rows. So that's our first line, right?
Yep.
Can you? And the answer might be no. But our first thing is like let's not let rows equate traditional teaching. Yeah. So if we must be in rows, because you said a lot, Molly, so I just want to unpack.
I know, I guess I was fast forwarding through that whole thing, huh?
Yeah, no, I just want to unpack it. Yeah. So like if we must be in rows, and I've heard things about everyone's got to, you know, desks facing forward, all of those things, like health first, okay, but we can turn our chairs. Or if you and I are partnered up, I can hold up my whiteboard for you, and you can hold your whiteboard at me, and we can minimize, you know, maybe it's loud because we have to talk from farther away. But if I show you, and there's such value to writing on a personal whiteboard. So I think it's really important that, number one, if we can avoid the rows, and Catlin gives you pictures of what that might look like. And then secondly, we find grouping structures and opportunities to talk to one another despite those rows, that it doesn't become that scary picture I saw of kids in boxes in rows. Like, I'm gonna have nightmares, right? Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, I think we'd love to hear from people other solutions around that. And we have other ideas coming forth in our next section shortly. Like if you have to have us all marching along together, that can be done really well too. But this group dynamic, having conversation.
Yeah. So, Kristen, I'm sorry to interrupt, Heidi, but Kristen just said she took a look at the blog that we put up, and she said it looks doable and it looks great. So good feedback. Thanks.
Yeah, and there's links there. Like, there's planning pages.
Yeah.
What if I'm just getting familiar with Catlin's work, but I think she's someone for us to keep our eye on.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Molly, you're talking about group work. So maybe we want to unpack that word and what we mean by that as well. So I'll let you kind of take that away.
You know, when there's an obvious way in which people talk about group work where there is a lot of tension around that conversation, and we're not talking about sorting kids by ability levels. We are talking about kids turning and talking to their neighbor, whoever that neighbor is. We are talking about arranging kids in a way that they are good conversationalists together. We just want kids to be talking to each other. So we're not talking about grouping kids by ability at all.
Yeah. So that's definitely something that we want to be upfront about when we're talking about group work, that we're not talking about ability grouping. We're not talking about keeping kids who struggle with this all together or who have strengths in that over here. We want to make sure that we're looking at mixed ability grouping and mixed personality grouping too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's definitely opportunities for us to consider all of those things when we're putting groups of students together, and maybe consulting with your cleaning and janitorial staff about when they're coming in and how often we can rearrange those groups as well, so that we're hearing from different voices as often as possible.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things also about grouping, there's a lot of us that have rotations happening. And again, we're not talking about fixed ability groups at all, but still, children rotating between modalities of learning is a very good thing. And Caitlin has proposed a plan that you can use if you're hybrid or fully remote, where you can have kids alternating from meeting in a small group with the teacher so you should check it out. So we can have rotation still happening in this environment. We just have to think outside the box a little bit about it. But we can, you know, the kids wouldn't move, the teacher would move if we're face to face. And online, we can set up our assignments in such a way that you rotate through the various components of a math lesson, just like you might have been doing in your room.
And so, I mean, depending on how things are set up for you, if you're in a hybrid model, or if, let's say, you're all fully remote to begin with, how do I then schedule my time with students so that I have them in small groups and I'm still able to meet with small groups? And I think that's, you know, going to be critical. We might be able to stream a short lesson to the whole class, but then how am I meeting with small groups, and how are small groups of students meeting together and collaborating together? And how am I hearing from all of them? And I think that's where we actually do have a lot of really good opportunities for using some of the technology that is there. So even Yeah.
Yeah, even in Google Meet, where you don't have the option at the moment, it's coming, but you don't have the option in the moment if you are teaching whole class to then put kids in groups. But I have had teachers who are using Google Meet and they just arrange different times for different groups, and there it is. And they're only responsible for working with one group at a time. So that is certainly something to consider, but we do know that option is coming for Google Meets in the fall.
And I read about a technique called fish bowling, which would be so cool online. So if I have my whole class online for our initial meeting and then scheduled meetings across the week to meet in small group, what we can do is say, we're going to do a fish bowl today. And Sue, Molly, and Heidi, I'd like you to turn your microphones on. And then everyone else's microphone is off. And then we model a number talk of sharing our strategies while everyone else is watching. And then we just rotate through who's in the fishbowl today, which is just such a nice way. And now I don't have to have a chat room, right? I'm just using a fishbowl. And maybe I've gotten those ideas ahead of time. So I'm strategically picking who's going to get to share their strategies in that fishbowl. So these things are all written about in that blog by Catlin, but we are going to talk to you later about like let's say you heard something from one of us already today and you're like, oh, my wheels are spinning, but I want support. That's what we do. Like we follow up and help you pull those ideas together. So should we move on to our third idea?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so our third best practice is that we want to be differentiating our instruction. So we have a thought about that.
We do. We have a lot of thoughts about this.
We certainly do.
In and out of pandemic. So let's be clear about this. But we are going to be focused on one specific area that we think works well with our conversation around manipulatives, our conversation around having students work in groups and share their thinking. So we want to consider low floor, high ceiling tasks, and gotten that wrong many times this week. That's why I had to think about it there.
Well, I was talking about a low ceiling and a high floor, but then we thought it'd have to be really short.
Yeah. So that's
could work for some.
Yeah, exactly. So when we think about that, we want to provide students with these opportunities. And so I know that is a term that some of you may be familiar with, others of you may not be as familiar with. And these don't happen every day or with every single standard, but they should be happening about once a week as we consider opportunities for students to look at and focus more on application of skills and to really focus on some of that productive struggle that we want students to be working with. So these tasks are really important. In a low floor, high ceiling environment, all of your groups are heterogeneously mixed. So they're not ability group, but it allows students to really work at their own pace and to think about different depths at different times. We will make the argument, and so do many others who work with low floor, high ceiling tests, that there should be something visual, and it should be a rich enough task that it's going to lead to a mathematical discussion. So a solve this problem one or two ways is not a low floor, high ceiling task. I'm not going to really discuss that. You solve it one way, I solve it another, done, check. But we want to think about all of the different options for students to have access to these kinds of problems and to engage with them. And someone else take it away for a moment, please.
When I was in my classroom in the early 90s, and I was learning about cooperative groups, and I was being mentored in a program out of Brown University with Ted Sizer about Essential Coalition of Schools and all these really awesome things. But my mathematics was structured around low floor, high ceiling, which means that lessons had a lot of latitude to them. So we were all working on the same thing, right? We were all working on that same task, but it went in different directions. And I would pose a task and I could walk around and notice where different people were going, with no assumptions necessarily about where it was going to go, because I was so frequently surprised who ran with it. So you set up a question or a task that's got a lot of room to run, right? And then you don't provide the scaffold immediately, like just in case, right? We do that just in time scaffolding. So based on what they do, and I want to argue that a scaffold can be like, we're going so much higher. That's what a scaffold does. It's on the outside of a building, and people can keep on climbing. So if I notice someone is like on fire about this question, I can keep firing more questions at you to move on up that building. So it's just a really exciting way to be able to teach and have us all working in community around the same task.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, when I was teaching in the 90s, I definitely was doing this, and it wasn't called low floor, high ceiling. I don't know what it was called. It was called fun in my classroom, but well, maybe not everyone thought it was fun, but I did. And honestly, it was my favorite mode of teaching for so many reasons, because I had the freedom to walk around the class and hear what kids were thinking. I was able to engage in discussion with kids. I was able to see kids pushing each other's thinking, which I think that is the most powerful teaching tool that there is, right? I always used to say to my seventh graders, they're not getting it from me. Can you please have a conversation with them, because I'm too old? So I really think that this is an opportunity for us to go down a road that is a really powerful learning experience for kids and a really rewarding teaching experience.
Yeah. So, I just put in the comments also a link. So Molly had found a really nice kind of summary article, and it defines low floor, high ceiling tasks. And then there's also an exercise where you take a more traditional task and then open it up. And then some links to where we can find some of these tasks. So again, to like really dig deep into this, will require some more conversation if this is new to you, but we are going to share avenues in which you would do that. Anything else about these tasks before we go forward? Heidi, we're going to share?
Yeah, so I'm thinking, in this environment, this is an opportunity to use some of the technology that we were talking about before as well. So even if I have kids working in their pods, and I do have some technology in the class, can I have them work on individual whiteboards, and then we put those whiteboards together? So we think about that. Like, so how can I share those things? Also, in using tools like Jamboard or Pear Deck or a whiteboard, virtual whiteboard, where we can then assign colors. So I did this with the group of teachers this week, where each teacher had a different color of sticky note. And so their work and thinking was on that around a central question. And then I could, as the instructor in this case, sort as things were happening in real time, which is sometimes hard when you're thinking about using that in the classroom, like, okay, I have to go around, I see this person has this and this person has this. But I was sorting in real time as they were adding their thoughts onto sticky notes. And it also allowed them to take a picture of their work and upload that to the Jamboard. So then I could see and show without having to pass a piece of paper, without having to like bring up a whiteboard where we're moving around. So we have to think about that strategically in this environment where we may not be able to move around as much as we thought. And or we think, oh, well, I'm remote, I can't do this. Well, actually, the technology here really allows us to see and think about that in ways that it may not have before. And then as the instructor, I can also tell who has contributed and who I may need to prompt, right? So if each person has a sticky note and I only see one sticky note from Molly and I see 10 from Sue, I'm going to tell Sue, could you stop monopolizing them?
It never happens.
It never happens. Right.
No, I'm very shy.
Yes, very, very, and so it's just, but I can then have that conversation. Okay, well, could you two talk? And let's have you two talk about what you're doing there, what you're thinking there. Whereas if students are working in a group on the same piece of paper, sometimes I don't know who wrote and who really is understanding and providing their thoughts to that. So this might be a way to consider how we provide some additional opportunities to hear more voices.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think we're getting close to time.
Yep.
So in summary, we don't think you need to let go of best practices, and we think you're amazing. We do this work ultimately in the service of children, but along the way, we've all discovered how much we love supporting teachers. And we think you are amazing and you've got this. And it's hard right now, but we think that you can still use your math tools. You can still have group work. And you can still differentiate your instruction. And it's hard sometimes, but it's always hard to do those three things. So we want to support you in continuing to think about best practices and not feel like, this pandemic got the best of me in my math instruction. I heard teachers say all the fun of why I went into teaching is gone. And now I'm left with all the things I don't like. So we want to change that. If that's how you're feeling, we want to validate that feeling and help you make some changes, because we think you're awesome and we have faith, so much faith, honestly. Here's 3 ways that we can support you. So as Molly mentioned at the beginning, we have a working study group. It's going to be 3 consecutive Mondays beginning on the 27th of July. And the meetings will run from 9 to 10:30 using Zoom. And that is a paid event. And there's a link on the LuniMath website. But if you would like to join other thoughtful educators looking to map out your school year and streamline your curriculum and plan your first unit, that is an opportunity for you. The second is come on into math together. So for example, the low floor, high ceilings, we're going to do a task like that on the evening of July 22nd. And once a month, we get together and do mathematics together, where we exemplify what that actually means, but hopefully with a task that you think is fun, right? So it's a doing math. And the last is we're just offering conversation, and that's a no cost opportunity for one of us to chat with you and just let you leave a 15-minute conversation with one actionable thing. That's really our goal, for us to understand. We just really want to be helpful in this moment. So to find all of those things, all of those support opportunities are linked on the LuniMath page. You just look at the banners on the top and it's super intuitive and you'll find it. So just lunimathconsulting.com. The event is the working study group. Math Together is our membership, and the chats are how do you contact us. So it's all right there. Am I leaving anything out, ladies?
No. I think you got it. I think you got it.
All right.
And last but not least, next week, we're very excited that we have Robert Kaplinski joining us for an interview. And so many of you might know him from his work with open middle problems. So he is going to be talking about how can we make changes right now to education. And he's going to be talking about his low floor, high ceiling problems. So we are super excited to talk to Robert. He is an amazing speaker, so we assume it's going to be a really fun interview. So please tune in to us next week, and we're excited.
And if this was helpful to you, this remains on the channel. So share with anyone, share with your staff. Let us know your feedback. We thank you for being here. And remember to always be curious. Take care,
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.